And now we would very much like to start our panel discussion. We have a remarkable group of guests and panelists with us today, starting with Dr. Omar Najim, who is the Director of the Executive Office of Health Authority in Abu Dhabi. He leads the Executive Office and Special Projects at the Department of Health in Abu Dhabi. The department's main role is to be the guardian of health in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi and to achieve the vision of a healthier city. Dr. Omar is a member of Gold Command Team for COVID-19 and part of the team leading on transforming healthcare and Abu Dhabi. He has several accomplishments. He is a trained head and neck surgeon in the UK and highly published as well. We will be kicking off the panel discussion initially with our first question to Dr. Omar. But what I would like to do is to quickly introduce the rest of our panelists as well. It would be lovely if I could invite our panelists to have their cameras on so everyone can put a face to the introduction. Thank you so much. So we also have Tushar Singhvi, who is the Deputy CEO and Head of Investments at Crescent Enterprises. He leads corporate development and investment activities and is responsible for evaluating and executing new investment opportunities. He also manages the portfolio companies through strategy and corporate development. Tushar has been instrumental in cultivating corporate prospects and in contributing to the development of Crescent Enterprises' strategic operational plans with the ports and logistics, business, aviation, healthcare, private equity, and venture capital verticals. Pleasure to have you with us as well, Tushar. Also, we have joining us Peter Stramek, Managing Partner at Early Stage VC Longevity Tech Fund, Singularity University EIR, and Biotech Board Member. Peter is a serial entrepreneur and investor for more than 33 years. He is building science, funding, and business infrastructure to support faster adoption of health span improving technologies. He is the founder of VC Longevity Tech Fund with 40 portfolio companies, former entrepreneur in residence at Singularity University, and a board member at Celaris Therapeutics and Animal Biosciences and Age Curve and YAM. He advises companies as a mentor at Foresight Institute and On Deck Longevity Biotech. Finally, our fourth panelist is Sharif Al-Ghamrawi, Senior Investment Advisor at Asset Capital Solutions. Sharif focuses on real estate investments, including 4- and 5-star hotel properties, luxury homes, land sourcing for mid to large new property development, and complete building sales. He also helps raise capital for various estate and technology ventures through private equity, venture capital, and joint venture partnerships. Thank you very much for joining us, Sharif, as well. We will get started. Just want to say hello to all of our panelists and very much looking forward to what you've got to say today. So the first question that I'd like to pose is for Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar, thank you very much for joining us today. If I could kindly ask you to unmute yourself, that would be lovely. Thank you. Dr. Omar, you've been leading the implementation of long-term healthcare strategy for the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, right? In an ambitious transformation of the entire healthcare system, how do you see that the longevity sector panning out? How do you see it panning out, and how do you see its prospects over the next 5 years in Abu Dhabi and also across the UAE?
Thank you very much, and I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First and foremost to His Excellency Hussein Mahmoudi and His Excellency Dr. Amin Lamiri. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. For the other colleagues, I would like to introduce Abu Dhabi first. So Abu Dhabi is one of the 7 Emirates that makes the United Arab Emirates, as been highlighted previously by Their Excellency. The ambitions and the aspirations of the healthcare sector, as well as the wider economy for UAE, is huge. It's been supported by many initiatives in the biotechnology sector, in the technology sector in general, in the AI, one of the first countries globally to introduce a ministry for AI. And we know where we're going. So in the words of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, when we are going to export the last barrel of oil, we're not going to be sad. In actual fact, we're going to be celebrating that last barrel of oil being exported, because what would you build between now and then is an economy based on knowledge, a knowledge-based economy that can stand tall and great among the many economies in the world. Now, if you step back and to answer your question, is basically where we heading and what's our interest in longevity. So the fact that there are so many changes in technology, so many changes in science, is proving its point that this change is going to be continuing going forward. Not only in the sense that it's going to be providing better solutions, but also in the sense that it needs to change, and it is changing completely the landscape of all industries, and healthcare is no exception. Healthcare itself is changing from what used to be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but the pace of change is gathering momentum over the last few years, more so over the last 2 years during COVID time. So it can bring you back so that the telemedicine exponential growth over the last, and telehealth over the last 2 years is a case in point. The fact that we developed vaccine within a few safe and effective vaccines within 10 months of starting a pandemic is something unheard of. In Abu Dhabi and UAE in general, we've been involved and we've been collaborating with many developers, if I can quote their vaccine stories, since about 2 months into the pandemic. We started talking to about 38 developers from around the world. We started to understand there are new technologies coming to the fore, the likes of mRNA or viral vector vaccines that have been used widely over the last 2 years and to successful effect and to provide the right immunity. Going forward, Abu Dhabi specifically is very much committed to this. We want to be a huge part of it. We've been a huge part of it in terms of the logistics and the technology being developed to transport these vaccines from the world to the world. UAE in general is the biggest place in transporting these vaccines between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi specifically with the HOPE consortium. We managed to do about 250 million vaccine doses passing through Abu Dhabi to over 60 countries. Now, with also the development, we are one of the largest places in the region to do genetic sequences of the virus and to identify the variants, identify how we deal with it, and providing that knowledge to develop solutions around it. And that is going to continue happening. We also started, I think Dr. Amin alluded to it earlier, which is the biggest genomic sequencing program of a population globally. So as many of you remember, the largest was the one done by Cambridge, which is 100,000 genome sequence, the one that UAE is undertaking and Abu Dhabi is leading through the different collaborations with the labs existing there. We are planning to do that, already started, a 1 million genome fully sequenced for the population. That's coupled with a fully connected health information exchange. That's coupled with the advancement and the technology around wearable. We're getting to a level, I think, which will be contributing to the longevity industry around a level where we, at some point, and not in the so distant future, we'll be having a digital twins of humans. We can do clinical trials on, we can do testing of longevity solutions on, without the restrictions that we used to have in the past or we currently having. What that puts on Abu Dhabi regulators as well as the MOHAB is the needs to be regulators of the future. So we might be, many of the countries are playing catching up with their regulations. What the thinking is in UAE and Abu Dhabi is how can we be the regulator of the future? The ideas that might be discussing today becoming a reality quicker and providing solutions to the wider world to the many of the problems we are seeing today. Longevity is here to stay, and I think the bioscience industry with the vaccines or the medications or the biotechnology is here to be supported going forward. And that's very much the ethos of UAE and Abu Dhabi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omar, for your response. We do have several questions that are coming in from our audience. We will try and address as many of these as we can. What I would encourage for our panelists and our keynote speakers is, if there is an opportunity for you to answer these directly in the Q&A chat, please do so. Tushar, we have actually had a couple of questions relating to the private sector. So I'm curious, having heard from our keynote speakers about the UAE longevity ecosystem, in your opinion, what is the role of the private sector in advancing the UAE's longevity agenda?
Thank you. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be speaking amongst all of you on this very important and exciting topic. So if we look at the impact of longevity on any economy, what, say, a decade ago was perceived to be a burden to the economy, adding fiscal pressure on governments to support an aging population, is now really being transformed into an opportunity. As we've seen, the elderly population is driving a substantial portion of the world's economic activity. As an example, in the US, Americans above the age of 50 are generating over $8 trillion worth of economic activity. So the longevity economy is actually opening up untapped opportunities for growth. This elderly population is a new growing group of consumers, workers, and innovators. So all of this, as Dr. Omar had mentioned, is driven by the rapid transformation and acceleration and advancements in longevity science, in genetic engineering, in the regeneration of organs, the regeneration of tissues and cells, which is not just enabling people to live longer, but to live a more healthy and productive life for longer. So they continue to be full service participants in the economy at large. So from a private sector perspective, that's a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity to invest in building the ecosystem, to invest in products and services which are targeted at this new growing customer segment, be it in the fintech space, providing financial services for this segment, which is going to be working longer and consuming financial services longer, insurance programs, but then all goods and services which are targeted at this segment, which is going to be much more productive and live longer. So I think it's a huge opportunity in the UAE. We have a young population with a median age of around 33, but this opens up a huge opportunity for the future as the population ages. And it's great to see the government taking very progressive steps to enable the environment to actually build that ecosystem. And the private sector can play a pivotal role in that, be it investing in the infrastructure that's required, be it investing in the research and innovation that's required to develop longevity science further here in the UAE. And as I said, to develop products and services that would enable boosting the economic productivity of the segment.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Tushar, for that answer. Much appreciated. I'd love to direct everyone's attention into the chat as well. We have the links for all of our speakers and panelists along with their websites and their LinkedIn contact details. So please do connect with one another. Moving on to Peter Schramek, our entrepreneur and investor of many, many years. From your experience, having worked in the US and globally as well, what is the impact of the growing aging population on a nation like the UAE?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. The current population peak density in UAE is around 36 years old. This doesn't seem like an aging problem. But that is not correct. Costs of healthcare and productivity decrease are exponential curves. in terms of aging. And these curves are multiplying each other. So most costs are concentrated within the last 20 years of our life. So unfortunately, the aging problem is here within this decade. But after this, aging research, which I'm very close to, tells us that the age of 35 or 36 is precisely the right moment to start with anti-aging interventions to delay the onset of chronic diseases and prolong future health span. So talking about the impact of aging, I would rather talk about the significant influence coming from the scientifically grounded realization that we can slow down the rate of aging and keep our health for a longer time. What we can see within our longevity tech fund portfolio companies, or we have more than 40 longevity companies. So by using personalized approaches, we are able to slow down aging on average by 5 years already. So that's my understanding of the aging, not only in UAE, but even global.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter, very much for your answer. Sharif El Ghamraoui, apologies if I've mispronounced your surname. And thank you so much for having us today. Sharif, you've got decades of corporate experience and you've worked internationally as well across the world. So I think you've got some great insight to bring here as well. So I'm quite curious, what does it take for the UAE to shift its public policy focus from the youth to addressing the needs of senior people, or at least place equal importance on both the youth and on senior people?
Sure, yeah. First, thank you, Roxy, for having me here. It's an honor to be with such a distinguished group of panel speakers. To touch on your question, I have to actually go back to the key points that Tushar made. I mean, he nailed it when highlighting that the infrastructure here, the ecosystem needs to be developed to welcome and facilitate services to the senior citizens. I mean, Dubai has always had a great approach to welcoming people from all over the world. If we look at the recent changes, for example, in the visa system or the visa structure, back in, I think, November 2021, you saw Dubai changing some of its policies in the UAE specifically, UAE generally, but Dubai specifically, changing the way they model their visas to encourage senior citizens who, as Tushar mentioned, are financially better off than the generations that precede them, get them to come here, have the ecosystem in terms of safety and health, the medical facilities, the hospitals. I think all of that is part of that public-private sector push to creating an environment that's going to welcome these senior citizens. I grew up in the US mostly. I spent some time, several years in Miami, Florida as an adult, and I've seen the infrastructure there and how it's geared to attract, let's say, baby boomers and late Gen Xers from all over the US to come down to Miami or to Florida in general and spend their golden years there. I think Dubai has got that great synergy in terms of the environment, the beaches, the weather, again, health and safety, personal safety being a top priority, since the UAE is now one of the safest places in the world. I think where I would personally like to see some of the successes that we see in Florida come over here. I would probably say that we need to pay a little bit more attention to care centers, how these care centers are geared towards taking care of senior citizens and their needs. And that needs to be underpinned by what His Excellency said, Dr. Amin, in terms of the legislation has to lead that. So again, we look to the public sector to create the framework that then allows private sector companies, entrepreneurs, investors to come in and start investing in that infrastructure. I think another area where we could see a lot of improvement is in new medicine, if you will, or experimental medicine. I mean, we've already seen, again, the UAE has decriminalized certain aspects of drug consumption and drug usage. But then there's a whole slew of new natural medicines that are coming into play that are actually providing huge economic and financial opportunities in the US. And these include everything from, acupuncture, herbal treatment, CBD oils, and even now in the US, the new rage is psychedelics. So I think we can't depend on the public sector to figure all this out by itself. But again, if we bring in experts from the private sector who have financial success and expertise in other markets, I think that would definitely create a better environment for seniors to come and invest. And selfishly, I want them to come and invest in real estate and other investment assets.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sharif, for your contribution. And please, to our audience, feel free to comment back and feedback on anything that you've heard in response to the questions as well. Now, going back to Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar, you are a trained medical practitioner. You've spent some time over in the UK with our healthcare system, the NHS as well. So I'm quite interested in talking to you about the framework of the health systems, especially over in the UAE. The Department of Health has been shaping their regulatory framework and encouraging the adoption of world-class best practices. And so when do we expect to see policies around longevity in Abu Dhabi? And what are the drivers of success factors for establishing these policies?
So generally speaking, the ethos in Abu Dhabi is not to build it from scratch. So it's always been build on whatever the world's thinking has got to. So look at the latest and then build on that from that onwards. Not only because of the population we're dealing with is different. So you have to appreciate there are about 200 different nationalities living in Abu Dhabi and UAE. These nationalities contribute to the diversity of what the system got to offer, but also present its own challenges even at the level of providing healthcare. So there is a big movement in the UK or the US or across the medical practices globally that says evidence-based medicine. Now, the problem is when you've got individuals who are coming from the Australians and individuals coming from Europe, UK, or America, each one of them will be producing different sets of evidence to support their way of practices. What is happening now, and definitely there is a new movement along this line, which is we need evidence of the evidence to say, these are the different evidences and this is what we need to do. What is this enabling us is also to make the regulations even more flexible and more focused on the most important aspect of providing care, which is the outcome. So when we say, this is the outcome that we desire to have, and please tell me that the processes or the infrastructure or the pathways you are deploying, you need to prove to me it doesn't matter where they come from, but the important aspect is they are achieving the required outcome, being it in the readmissions, being it in the longevity, being it in the different aspects of providing care. And that's now being extended beyond just the provision of care. It's coming to even when assessing new technologies or new medications related to longevity, is to say, is this going to provide a better outcome than the one existing already, or the status quo? And if it is so, could we link the payment and link the rewards to the outcome of what the promise of this medications or new technology or new process is going to be? I think that there are already steps being taken and there are already case studies being done and proof of concept being achieved in that regard. Now, in addition to that, so you have to appreciate our place in the world. So we see genomics as playing a big role in personalized health. Everybody is saying in the past, many of the solutions has been general. So when we talk about statin, irrespective of the brand, you might find the genetics of certain populations, being it in the Middle East or Indians or Japanese, each one of them is different to the response to these statins. Now, how can we make that more personalized? How can we make the next operations or the next advice or the next intervention based on the personalized aspect of the information that we're getting, being it from the genomics, sometimes from the wearable, sometimes from the individuals themselves, which will make us to have more impactful healthcare that will provide the premise of longevity beyond the 10 or 20 or 30 years we are looking at. There is now a convergence of technology. So you've got the biology converging with physics, converging with chemistry, and converging with IT. That was creating a new, so to speak, species in the words of Yuval Harari. So instead of being sapiens, we might be looking at an advanced species in the future. And all of that presenting its own challenge. Again, how do you regulate it in the right way? How do you make sure that without stifling the innovation that drove it, you are achieving the maximum impact while protecting the population that you take care of?
Thank you very much, Dr. Omar. And that's a really good point about the convergence, especially bringing in different types of tech as well, and how that definitely impacts. Going back to Tushar. So Tushar, you spent a lot of time evaluating opportunities and investments. So going back to looking at investments, how can public and private partnerships attract specialty healthcare facilities focused on longevity, through, for example, entrepreneurship, investments, business incubation, and joint ventures as well?
Yeah, sure. So I think, definitely the public-private partnership is essential to drive not just in terms of longevity, but broadly healthcare and life sciences development here in the region. As Dr. Omar said, the government is taking progressive steps to lay down the regulatory framework, which is required to attract private capital and create that enabling environment. And the private sector, as I said before, will invest to reap the benefits of this huge opportunity, longevity in particular, but more broadly. We've been investing in healthcare for many years now, but have now basically, but we see, what the internet was in the early 2000s. We see life sciences and biotech really driving transformational change in the next couple of decades. And we've set aside a separate pool of capital to invest in life sciences and biotech. And this is across domains. We've invested in gene therapy, gene editing, in precision medicine, in therapeutics driving oncology, but also the general health tech in developing doctor-patient platforms, nursing platforms. So there's huge opportunity across the board. And it's about finding unique ways of structuring investments where the public sector and the private sector could come together and both contribute to this. So that will take the form of incubating new companies, driving entrepreneurship from within, but also investing in cutting edge technology and innovation happening internationally and help bringing that to the region.
Thank you very much, Tushar. I think there are several members of the audience who would definitely find that quite helpful. Absolutely. Moving on to Peter, and apologies, I'm conscious of time as well. So, if I could ask for the remaining sort of questions to be a little bit briefer, I'd much appreciate that. Thank you. So, Peter, you've really invested so much of your time and energy and focused in on the longevity industry as well. It's clearly a key passion of yours as well. So, in your opinion, what are the key components of a sustainable older age care plan, and what is the importance of a national longevity development agenda?
Thank you. So I would rather focus on prevention and change than sustainability, because using personalized geroprotectors and advanced strategies, for example, over the age of 50, which is not the elderly age, quickly reduce extensive costs and infrastructure needs for health and even the elderly care later. And having said that, UAE has a chance to become one of the healthiest nations in the world, but it requires the utilization of top aging science and solution now, for example, Dr. Omar addressed. So I would say maybe the one example, UAE can be very progressive in regulatory approvals and certifications of new anti-aging drugs and treatments, because this will motivate many progressive companies to localize their activities in UAE, and also can create a massive health and wellness tourism industry. Seeing the spectrum of the technologies like in companies of our portfolio, so we will see more powerful therapies based on mRNA or gene therapies or new kinds of peptides or bacteria within the next couple of years. At least we will run a lot of clinical trials and provide more clinical and science evidence. And this must be including these UAE and nations, because as it was properly addressed, we need this diversity to see what works for whom, and finally have a truly personalized strategies for care.
Thank you very much. It's an absolutely a valid point. You know, one size doesn't necessarily fit everything, and it's not always the right solution. So finally, Sharif, a quick question for yourself, Sharif El Gamrawi. In terms of the impact, what do you believe is the socio-economic impact of longevity in the UAE and the broader Middle East and North Africa region?
Sure. I mean, to make it quick, I mean, in terms of the social impact, you're obviously enabling different generations of families to stay together longer, and that in its own right has a positive impact on longevity. Grandchildren can spend more time with their grandparents, live with them, learn from them, and that's something that I think has been missing a lot, not necessarily in the rest of the region where we have more traditional cultures and families tend to live together longer. But I think here in the UAE, a lot of that has been lacking. I know a lot of my friends who were born here in the UAE, their parents left. And now they've got the opportunity to come back because, again, the ecosystem is there to bring them back. But not only that, it also brings back their wealth. It brings back investments in properties. Most of my new clients today are, you know, senior, I won't call them senior citizens, but definitely people who are over the age of 55, who have a lot of money to invest. They're the ones that are coming to talk to us here in the UAE about setting up hospitality funds, technology funds, and so forth, or are looking for large assets to invest in that will create, you know, recurring income that will give them the kind of lifestyle that they want to have. That they would have been able to afford back home, but coming back here presents a different opportunity because obviously it's a new market, it's a growth market, and the best part is we don't pay taxes here. So, well, not completely. So I think these would be the core impacts, if you will, in 30 seconds or less.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I'm conscious of time. I know we've run over a little, but I would love to invite additional commentary from yourselves and perhaps some concluding remarks from our panelists and keynote speakers as well. Perhaps if you'd like to comment on any of the questions or any of the comments in chat, then, you know, I'm happily, I'd be happy to ask you to spend a couple of minutes to do that. If there's anybody that wants to. Otherwise, you know, please do connect with some of the questions that we've got in chat. Perhaps there's any commentary that you've heard on one another, on any of our presentations.
Just a quick comment. So I was looking at the different comments. So we definitely are very much open to collaborations, knowledge sharing. In fact, I mean, the success of UAE model has not been overnight success out of COVID, but it's a long-term investment, and it is a forward-looking and futuristic about its ambitions and the step it needs to take. We're very much open to sharing that knowledge. If there's anything that we learned from COVID-19 is that collaboration is key. There's a difference in different countries' performance depending on how open to collaborations they are. A collaboration that goes beyond professional boundaries, being it private or public or commercial boundaries, even with different competitors coming into one place to providing solutions, or geographical boundaries across political divides or political spectrum. We're very much open. We totally believe on it. We also believe that we are all one humanity. There is nobody safe talking about the pandemic until everybody is safe. But also when we work towards a common humanitarian goal of feeds to the benefits of the wider world. It moves faster, and it's always, in our experience, more effective.
Thank you.